Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session about TEAS and HESI practice questions. Specifically, today we're going to do some anatomy and physiology questions. So let's get started. Those of you who are on Facebook or YouTube, welcome. Those of you here on Zoom, welcome. Type in the chat as we go so I can kind of see your answers. And we're going to spend the next 30 minutes going through some anatomy and physiology questions. If you're in nursing school, this might help you too. You may be in your anatomy and physiology class. So let's get started. We're going to start with reproductive system questions. So, what is the reproductive system? So, that is female and male parts, right? So, there are different structures in the female body than there are in the male body, and they all do different things. So, let's do a question. If the fallopian tubes are tied during a tubal ligation, what function does the patient lose? What function does the patient lose? Take a moment, read through these answers. Now, if you are studying for the TEAS and HESI exam, I recommend spending about a minute maximum on each question. So, also, just realized I forgot to introduce myself. Sorry about that. I'm Tiffany Palino. I'm the manager of pre-licensure and continuing education and certification services here at Archer. I'm also a nursing tutor, so maybe you've seen me before. If you haven't, hello. I've been a nurse over 16 years and an educator over 5, and I am so excited to be here with you all. Okay, let's see. Any answers in the chat? What do you think? Uterus cannot contract for labor. Eggs are not produced. Eggs are delivered to the uterus or fertilized. Sperm are not able to leave the epididymis. What do we think the answer is? Someone in the chat here on Zoom is saying C. You are absolutely correct. Great job. So it prevents the eggs from traveling. So tubal ligation is also known as getting your tubes tied, if you've heard of this. So these tubes allow the egg to leave the ovaries and travel to the uterus. This is also the site of fertilization. So absolutely correct. This prevents the egg from traveling and meeting the sperm for fertilization. Great job, you guys. Got it. Awesome, awesome. Now remember, um, fallopian tubes do not control muscle contractions. That would be the uterus. So the uterus controls all the contractions. That's why that one's wrong. B does not really interfere with any ovarian function at all. They continue to release eggs as part of that normal menstrual cycle, but these eggs are simply blocked when there's the tubal ligation. And then D, female anatomy. So sperm would still be able to leave the male body, right? And that is why that one is wrong, because that's the male reproductive system, not the female reproductive system. Excellent. Okay, let's do another question in the reproductive. Which of the following reproductive structures do men and women share? What do both men and women share? What do both men and women have? Is it seminal vesicles, cervix, urethra, or labias? This is all about structure. Couple answers in the chat here. Very good. Eileen, Yolanda, Tanisha, very good. You're absolutely right. We all have a urethra because a urethra is to urinate, right? That's where the urine transports. In males, actually, it transports both urine and semen, but in females, it only transports that urine. So seminal vesicles, those are only males. Cervix, only female, and labia is the external part of only the female reproductive system. Very good so far. We're starting strong, everybody. Great job. So now let's move on to the integumentary system. Why is the integumentary system so important? Does anyone remember? Why is the integumentary system so important? Type in the chat if you know. It's our protection, right? Very good. It's protection, right? It's our first layer of protection. Excellent. So, very important part of the anatomy and physiology. Let's do question number three here. A nurse observes that a patient defense, yes, Yolanda. A nurse observes that a patient's skin is flushed and warm to the touch after prolonged exposure to heat. Which response best explains this observation? So, this is talking about what does this mean? What is happening in the body when the patient's skin is flush and warm after they've been exposed to heat? What is happening? Take a few minutes here, read through these answers. One more second here. Yes, if you said C, you are correct because that is vasodilation. So, vasodilation in the dermis brings warm blood closer to the surface, allowing the heat to dissipate and cool the body. So, this is all about thermoregulation, right? Thermoregulation. Now, where are my apocrine glands? They're really more related to my stress. So, that would be the sweat. And they're less active in the thermoregulation, but more under stress. B is not correct because fat insulates, it doesn't remove heat. So it insulates the body. And then sebum is released by sebaceous glands to lubricate the skin, but it's not necessarily for temperature regulation. So this question was all about temperature regulation. Okay, next one. Which of the following best explains why someone with damage to their sweat glands may experience difficulty maintaining homeostasis during exercise? So we have to know what homeostasis is here, right? So read through these answers. Let me read the question one more time. Which of the following best explains why someone with damage to their sweat glands might experience difficulty maintaining homeostasis during exercise? So during exercise. Just another couple seconds here. So think about what our sweat glands do. What do the sweat glands do? Yeah. Ooh, okay. So the answer here is C. They would struggle to cool their body through evaporative cooling because if there's damage to their sweat glands, okay, um, then they're not able to secrete stress during heat stress, right? So without those functioning sweat glands, the person cannot cool their body. And then A is not correct because temperature sensation is mediated by sensory nerve endings, not necessarily sweat glands. B is not correct because that skin excretes minerals, not of reabsorbs them. It secretes or excretes, sorry, so it releases. And then D is incorrect because sebum is oily, not temperature regulating, which we learned in the previous question that it's not temperature regulating. Okay, so what we just talked about with the skin, all about temperature, right? Now we're going to move on to a pretty tough topic, the endocrine system. The endocrine system is a tough one. So here we go. Which of the following endocrine glands controls body temperature, internal balance, thirst, hunger, and sleep, etc.? So a few more things, but those are the top ones listed here. So what glands? Body temperature, internal balance, thirst, hunger, sleep. Anyone remember what gland? What gland? Few more seconds here. Okay, if you guessed C, you are correct. The hypothalamus. The hypothalamus, it regulates all internal things, okay? Balances and maintains homeostasis. The pineal gland is for sleep, so that's melatonin. Thyroid is for metabolism. So I always like to think about my hyper and my hypothyroidism. They have slow metabolism with the hypo and high metabolism with the hyper. So it must have everything to do with metabolism. Adrenal glands, I think of my Addison's and my Cushing's disease. That has everything to do with cortisol and adrenaline. So remember, the adrenals respond to stress. So hypothalamus is the correct answer there. Let's try another endocrine question. If someone is diagnosed with type 1 or type 2 diabetes, what organ is not functioning correctly? Make sure you're reading that closely. So someone diagnosed with type 1 or type 2 diabetes, which organ is not functioning correctly? So you have to know what organ is affected with someone with type 1 or type 2 diabetes. Yes, Eileen, you are correct. Exclamation point. I like that. Yes, Yolanda over on Facebook. Yes, absolutely. You guys got this. Pancreas, right? So remember, the pancreas is near the stomach. It controls glucose. It takes in that excess glucose and it stores it or releases it back into the blood. So it's all about our sugar in our pancreas, right? The pineal gland, melatonin. We just learned about that in that previous question. Parathyroid gland, that's all about calcium. Calcium. And then gonads regulate sexual development and reproduction, not blood sugar. Very good job. Okay, moving on to another system here, we have the urinary system. Urinary system. Okay, let's do this question. What is the name of the tube that connects the kidneys to the bladder? What is the name of the tube that connects the kidneys to the urinary bladder? Fallopian tubes, vas deferens, ureter, or urethra? All right, one more second here. If you said ureter, you're absolutely correct. So this tube connects the kidney to the bladder. So it helps with the flow of urine from the kidneys for temporary storage in the bladder until we excrete it out. There are two ureters, one attached to each kidney, unless someone only has one kidney, I suppose. And they are essential for the urinary tract. So they're essential because we want to make sure that urine flows from the kidneys out and we excrete it out. Fallopian tubes, unique to women. Vas deferens, unique to men. So maybe you could cancel those two out right away. Maybe you were torn about urethra. This also helps urine leave the body, but they're not, urethras are not connected to the kidneys. Urethra is the conduit through the urine expelled through the bladder. So it's connected to the bladder and it just does not connect directly to the kidneys. It connects the bladder to the external body. So that's what we have to remember. So maybe if I was studying this, I'd probably draw myself a little diagram, right? Maybe put my kidneys, draw the ureter, draw the bladder, then draw the urethra. So I understood the flow because ureter and urethra kind of sound alike. All right, great job. Let's do the next one. Which structure in the urinary system is primarily responsible for filtering blood and forming urine? Which structure is primarily responsible for filtering blood and forming urine? Urethra, kidney, bladder, ureter. Maybe the last question helped you with this a little bit. Yes, Eileen. Good. Good, Tanisha. Anyone else? Okay, yes, the kidneys. If you are saying the kidneys, you're absolutely correct. So, a good way to rule out what the answer is, we just had a question about the urethra not too long ago, just had a question about the ureter, and we know that the bladder stores the urine, so it must be the kidneys, right? That is one test-taking strategy. But the kidneys are really, really the ones who filter the blood and remove waste. They're kind of like the strainer. They also help regulate fluid balance, electrolytes, and produce hormones like renin and erythropoietin. The urethra is that tube that expels urine from the body. Bladder stores the urine, and ureters transport the urine from the kidneys to the bladder. Very good job. Okay, gotta talk about the immune system. I know this is going very, very fast, so we have on-demand videos at Archer if you want to follow along and you need some more anatomy and physiology. I'm just kind of picking a couple questions. Okay, here we go. Distinguish between innate and adaptive immunity. So, this is a question all about terminology. If I was studying this, maybe I would make some flashcards so I understood the difference between innate and adaptive. Take a moment, read through those answers. You might be able to cross a couple out. Innate versus adaptive. What is the difference between innate and adaptive immunity? This one's tough. All right, less than 20 seconds. I don't want you to spend more than a minute on these to help you get ready for your TEAS or HESI exam. All right, five, four, three, two. Yes, Eileen, if you said B, you are absolutely correct. So, adaptive immunity, that's the formation of memory cells, which allows the body to respond more quickly and effectively to a pathogen if it's encountered again. Now, innate immunity does not have memory cells, and it responds the same way to all pathogens. That's the big key here. So A is the opposite of what is true, so that's why that's not correct, right? Um, and then C, innate immunity is present from birth and provides immediate general protection. Adaptive immunity develops over time. Think of the word adaptive. You adapt to your environment, adaptive, so it develops over time. And then D is wrong. Physical barriers like skin are part of innate immunity, but not adaptive immunity. Antibodies are produced as part of adaptive immunity to target specific pathogens. So the way I like to think of this is adaptive, right? So we adapt, our bodies adapt as we grow and as we change and as we're exposed to more things. Innate is constant. Adaptive, you kind of build your immune system. If you've ever heard someone say something like that, that's kind of what adaptive immunity means. Okay, that was tough. Let's try another one. Which cell type is primarily responsible for producing antibodies? This is another thing we just have to know the definition of these and what they do. What type of cell is responsible for producing antibodies? Is it a type of T cell, helper, cytotoxic? Is it the microphage or phage or the B cell? Which one? All right, 30 seconds. Any guesses? Any guesses? It's okay if you're not sure, but let's pretend it's the test and we only have about a minute to answer the question. If you guessed D, then you are correct. Very good. So D is B cells. They produce antibodies in response to antigens during adaptive immune response. Remember, we just talked about adaptive immunity. Now, helper T cells activate B cells, but they don't make any antibodies. And then cytotoxic cells, cytotoxic, right? Toxic, they kill infected cells. And then macrophages or phages engulf pathogens. Okay, moving on to another system here. We're talking about the skeletal system next. So we're going to fill in the blank with this one. Bone building is done by blank, whereas bone degrading is performed by blank. Bone building is done by blank, whereas bone degrading is performed by blank. So some more terminology here. Osteoblast, osteoclast, osteoclast, osteoblast, long bones, short bones, or osteons and Harvarison canals. Okay, I have a couple guesses in the chat. If you said A, you are absolutely correct. So osteoblast, build. Think about them as building, okay? Blast, build. Clast, destroy. B was the opposite, right? C, long and short bones, those are bone types. They don't have much to do with the cells, they're the types of bones. And osteons are functional units of compact bone, which will generate osteocytes and osteoblasts and clasts, but they're not part of the bone building. Very good. Good job. You guys got that one. Maybe you remember the osteoblast. Those ones build. Very good. Okay, number 12. Which bone type protects vital organs and is typically thin and flat? What is the name of the thin and flat bone? That's basically what this is saying. And then, think about the bones in our body that protect vital organs. Our vital organs are in our torso, right? So what are those bones like? Are they long, short, irregular, or flat? Long, short, irregular, or flat? What do we think? Yes. Okay, if you said D, you are correct. Very good. They're flat. Flat bones, think about the sternum, the ribs, the skull. They're all flat bones. Long bones is our longer bones in our body, like our femur or our ulna. They support movement and weight. Short bones are stability and cube shaped. So they are not really thin, right? And then irregular bones, like our vertebrae, they are very complex, but they serve a purpose. Okay, we are gonna finish off with some random sections, right? All different kind of topics. Here we go. Which systems work together to support pregnancy from conception to birth? What systems work together to support pregnancy from conception to birth? Yes, Eileen in the chat, yes. Pregnancy to conception to birth. Yeah, if you guessed A, you're absolutely correct. Reproductive and endocrine, because this is the facilitation of fertilization and gestation, while the endocrine is all about hormones. That's crucial, especially for ovulation and implantation and then fetal development. So skeletal and digestive just really aren't responsible for these other ones, just really aren't responsible for reproduction. Okay. Number 14, a patient is experiencing rapid breathing due to anxiety. Which two systems are primarily interacting to create this response? So we have rapid breathing due to anxiety. What do we think? Good, Eileen. Yes, you are correct. And anyone else want to guess? Very good. Yes, we are talking about the nervous system and the sympathetic response, right? That's what's happening in the nervous system. That's going to trigger the respiratory system to increase the heart rate. Respiratory rate, sorry. And that's going to help oxygenate the tissues. And that's really our fight or flight. Have you heard of that fight or flight? That's what's happening here. Endocrine, we already talked about that, is always about hormones. Sure, it might release the stress hormone, but it's not directly related to respiratory response. And then I forget what C was. Oh, muscular and skeletal. That's really important for breathing, but it's not really responsible for this during the stress that's happening. And then digestive and urinary was not really talked about here, right? We're talking about respiratory rate. Very good. Okay, number 15. A patient with a broken femur is unable to bear weight and has muscle weakness. Which two systems must coordinate to allow movement to return after healing? So basically, which two systems must coordinate to allow movement to return after healing because they broke their femur and they can't really bear weight because they have some muscle weakness? What two systems have to work together? Yes, Eileen. Yes, Tanisha. Yes, Ralph. Yeah. It's got to be that nervous system and the skeletal system. So what's going to happen? The nervous system is going to send those signals to the skeletal system. It's going to cause those muscles to contract and help move the bones. But it requires some recovery in both sides, right? Because we need to coordinate. There needs to be some coordination between the nerves and then again the muscles. The other ones are not really directly related to bone and muscle control. And remember, the digestive system and respiratory system aren't really going to help this client kind of move their muscles again, move their body again. Okay. And our last question today, after a high protein meal, which two systems coordinate to digest the protein and remove the excess nitrogenous waste? So, what two systems help digest protein and then remove the excess waste? Yes, Eileen. I love the exclamation point that you're putting in the chat. You are confident. I love it. Yes, Tanisha. Yes, Shova. Manur. Very good. Hey, guys, digestive system. Absolutely. And what did we talk about earlier that the kidneys do? They remove waste. So the kidneys will remove that waste. Um, very, very, very good. It's called urea, the waste that they're going to remove. Awesome. Endocrine, all about hormones and not really related to that protein metabolism. And then respiratory and circulatory, they do other stuff, right? All about the blood and the gas, not protein. And then metabolic waste removal is our muscular and integumentary system. So awesome job, everyone. I want to thank you all for being here. You did great. We will have another webinar next month. So stay tuned for that on the website. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My name is Tiffany Palino. You can email me at tiffany.palino@archerpulse.com and I will answer any of your TEAS, HESI, any kind of questions. And if you're testing soon, you got this. My favorite advice is wear your favorite outfit on test day because you are just going to dress better, you're going to feel better, you're going to do better, right? Even right down to your favorite, whatever, socks, okay? So good luck. You got this. Keep practicing, and we are here if you need us. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.